It's Wednesday Night Undress from Conroy's Emporium, where you can get anything your heart desires. Have you washed your hands tonight, Conroy? Very tasty. My name's Jeremy Taylor, and welcome to the talk show that pretends to care, where we ask our customers to join our team. Our regular panel tonight, Ivo Ivanov, weapons specialist and professional cupcake tester. Kathleen Taylor, founder of multiple martial art disciplines, including full-contact bonsai. Donna Kane-Swan, pitcher for the 1966 World Series Atlanta Braves. And, last but not least, Louis Orlando, a former Guinness World Record holder for consecutive readings of green eggs and hams.
You know it.
Our producers for tonight, of course, Eric, the producer, and Neil Rasmussen. So we're talking about guns. Going to be, well, not actually guns. A bunch of gunk holing, gunny sacks in gunk holes with gun stocks, which only can get gunkier on the gunnels
I think gunky
made
is the
of
best word
gunite.
so far.
It's only just begun.
It's so gunky. Guns. We're going to be talking not about guns, but around guns. There may be too many in the USA, but that's a fact of life. There may even be one for every person in the country. Gun crime and deaths due to a gun are constantly increasing. So moving past the right or wrong rhetoric, what, if you were president and bearing in mind Second Amendment rights, might be a sensible course of action for you to take to reduce the violence? For example, did anyone complain about the introduction of seatbelts?
Actually, yes. A lot of people.
Did they complain about cigarettes?
Only for up until yesterday.
Correct. So let's look at where we are at the moment. Then I'd like to point our panel in the general direction of the poor old president. The president of this country made his last State of the Union address, the country's first black president. Has he performed as those who went out and cheered for him 8 years ago dreamed he would? Has he actually achieved for the African-American community? And has the African-American community held back on him because of deference? And then we have a number of games, new games, that we're going to try tonight, and we shall pull in various different people. One, bona fide or bollocks. Well, that seems good. And then there's another one, When I Met. So let's make a start with guns. And, I did get, incidentally, an email from Barack Obama today, strangely enough. I'm just showing everybody the email. There it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that name. Who?
Barack Obama. He's the president. It goes, Jeremy, last night I gave
I think
my
it's
final...
one of those English things in terms of
Okay,
pronunciation.
fair enough.
Oh, right. Well, anyway, it is. I got it at 10:42 this morning. Last night I gave my final State of the Union address now, as I try to get caught up in nostalgia, Jeremy, because we have a whole lot of work to be done, Jeremy, over the next 12 months. But after 7 years of dedication and support from people like you and Lawrence, I need to take a minute to say thanks for being with me over the years, because without standing together, we simply can't create the kind of change that America deserves. And in 2016, we've got to keep fighting so we can finish what we've started. So there we are. We have an actual from the president himself. But what
I didn't know you got to meet with him. That's pretty damn cool.
No, it's the other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry. He got to meet with you.
Yes, back in the day. Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, not is it right to have guns because it is a right. Americans have the right to own a weapon. So be it. We don't want to argue about that now. What we do want to find out about is, if you became president, what might you do? Because somebody did it with seatbelts, somebody did it with cigarettes. What about guns? What sensible thing could a president do to mitigate the issues with guns? Off you go, Lewis.
Okay, so if I was president, I would have met with the gun control, the pro-gun lobby, and said, I will be your bully. I will stand up in front of the country and say all guns are going to be out of here if, at the end of the day, we can sign meaningful legislation that limits the amount of guns that are on the streets.
And what do they get out of it?
They get a villain, somebody that they can point to.
They don't need a villain. They just want to sell guns.
But see, this is the thing. Right now, they are using Obama in exactly that way. Every time Obama goes on television and says something about guns, gun sales go up because the pro-gun lobby takes that.
What I'm saying is they have no incentive to actually pass any legislation.
They
Hang
don't
on,
now.
I have a point here because you said earlier something about seatbelts. And I did a little research today about seatbelts, elevators, a couple other things. It took, and is still taking, it's been 26 years since seatbelts have been introduced.
Really?
And we are still at maximum only 80-some-odd% compliant with it. And how did we finally get to that 80%? Advertising. And the same thing, it took almost 50 years for people to become comfortable with the elevator, which was introduced into this country, yours earlier, but into ours in the 1870s, and it took almost 50 plus years for lifts, for people to use them. What you need, whether you start today with your, as you said, someone is a boogeyman. You need a group of people who are in it for the long haul. And I don't mean a year or two. I'm probably talking 50 or more years where you just relentlessly and almost insidiously keep that advertising campaign going and going and going until you finally start to get people. It's propaganda. There's no other word for it. But you have to change the nature of the propaganda away from pro to anti.
Well, you are the first person, and I've done this in the podcast, and I've also broadcast this on radio a couple of times, as Eric, the producer, knows.
He's bragging.
And no one has yet come up with a reason or a how do we deal with this. And you're the first person who's actually come up with any sensible, answer to the question, because what normally happens is people just say we're allowed to or we shouldn't have.
Well, unfortunately, as Americans, we want everything now, today. At the very least, shipping in 2 days.
The problem?
You have to, in order for something like this to work, you've got to be willing to put in the decades.
And the problem comes in with the money. The people who are making money off of guns are pro selling all the weapons they can, plus some for insurance, plus some for insurance over the, plus more money. And there is no money in cutting them down. So there's nobody to fund it.
I am embarrassed because I was going to donate a few $1 million towards this from
You know what? I just started a new charity that's anti-gun control that needs a couple $1 million donated.
I was very happy to do that, but then I discovered that if, with the money from the lottery, I have to give Brownback $40 million, or more than $40 million, and I'm damned if I'm going to give
Which
it
he would immediately turn around and
so I'm
give
not
off
buying
to
a ticket. I'm sorry.
His friends.
It's not going to. Doesn't matter what you say.
The pro-gun lobby has a strategy, and it involves not giving any kind of concession, even the most reasonable concession, like the blacklisted, the no-flight lists. That makes sense, right? Makes complete sense. But they believe that any concession is like a gateway to more concessions.
Exactly.
And they're right.
And every time there is a mass shooting, they double down and get even more,
support.
Support.
Well, yes,
and
because
the
You want to prevent a
anti-gun
bunch
lobby
of
has
kids
to
from being
do
shot?
the
Give
same
them guns.
thing, and the gun lobby has been doing it for decades, and that's the difference. Is you've got to be willing to go the long
How you
haul.
doing, Tom?
Well, yeah,
Did you
it's-
wash
well,
those hands? I mean, really? Come on. Okay.
Well,
I didn't.
paranoia is
And we're broadcasting tonight our podcast from the only emporium in town that allows weapons. Once you've got past the anti-aircraft weapons at the front door.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Evo?
I was just saying that obviously paranoia is a valuable fuel for any kind of sell campaign for weapons, and it's very good for business. The anti-gun lobby, the Brady campaign, they give a rating to every president in terms of what he done to for more gun control, and Obama up to this point had one of the lowest ratings of all time. So he hasn't really done anything. He hasn't really been allowed to do anything. I know he does want to do it. After Sandy Hook, it was devastating, obviously. for at least for every normal person, it was devastating. Some people took advantage of the situation to sell more weapons.
Some people.
But
how about
yeah,
every person?
everybody. But there was a little girl that died in the massacre. Her name was Grace McDonald, and I'm very familiar with her story because I wrote about her a lot. Very, very long article. And Grace, her parents are just these two fantastic human beings. Fantastic. She was an incredibly gentle soul, extremely talented. At the age of 6, she was an extremely talented artist. She would draw these beautiful paintings and just loved everything in the world. Loved her favorite things were, beaches and the ocean and seagulls and the peace sign. And when she died, her coffin, her parents surprised everybody because her coffin was Snow White, and they gave markers to everybody at the funeral and said, you draw something that you remember from Grace on her coffin, that let her go, out of this world this way. And so they drew, all her favorite things, the beaches and the seagulls and all that stuff. And it was a very, very touching funeral. It was very well covered, and President Obama reached out to the parents of Grace, and he met with them, and they gave him a painting that she drew. It was this incredible. You can see it on the internet. It's this giant owl with the little trees. She's so big that the trees look tiny at the owl's feet, and for some reason she drew a heart on the owl, and they gave this to the president. And the president framed this painting and put it in the Oval Office. So he says, I did this so every day I go to work, it reminds me that I have to do something. And he says this is perfect because it's the owl is kind of a symbolic of wisdom, but that owl is wise, but it also has a heart. And that's what we need. We need to be wise and have a heart in this situation. And so, something needs to be done. I know Jeremy's right. We can't just bang guns. But hey, you know what? We can, because in Dunblane, you remember Dunblane, of course, Jeremy. You can tell us all about it. But that was the biggest and most horrible massacre in the history of England. And a crazed person went in, just like in Sandy Hook, and shot a bunch of first graders and their teacher, in the middle of the day during gym class. And pretty much in 3 months, all guns were banned in Great Britain. There was no guns in Great Britain. As you know, even policemen don't have guns in Great Britain. There's, I think, 12 murders per year from firearms in Great Britain. 12. Here, 12 a day, if we're lucky. In Great Britain, the Olympic shooting team, cannot practice in Great Britain. Can you believe this? This is taking things to the extreme. They have to travel to Switzerland to get prepared for the Olympics because you cannot have a firearm in Great Britain. So a civilized country, a first world country, can do it. Obviously, we cannot do this here. We are completely different culture and different, but something needs to be done for the love of God. Something needs to be done so children don't get fucking killed.
It's what is important, though, in a podcast like this and a conversation is to remember that this is America and we have Second Amendment rights. And the Second Amendment, although one can argue about it, just like birthers do about where people are born, the fact of the matter is that at the moment we have guns. What we're interested in, what we're talking about today, is how might we affect the tragedies that happen every day with guns. And Conroy has come out of the lavatory
with his Smith and Wesson,
or I'm not sure which, the kitchen,
with, we hope, clean hands.
with possibly clean hands, but he's picking his zits at the moment. It's very
mystery. Well,
go on. What do you think, Mr. Conroy?
Well, I just wanted to take this just a tiny bit to the one side, and it's something that's going on in Lawrence, Kansas, where we're broadcasting from. And this is why maybe the NRA and its supporters are a little hard to deal with. We have a situation in Lawrence, like in most places, and a lot of places around the world, even in Ireland, where they banned smoking in public establishments, and the reason was because it provided it was a health issue. And me and other bar owners went up to the state, and we spoke in front of the senators and the congressmen. On the left hand, a lot of evidence that said secondhand smoke to non-smokers was not dangerous. Okay, and of course the other side says there is. So it's one of those things where it's not etched in stone. You just have it. Some people say yes, some people say no. Now in politics, the anti-smokers won. Now it comes up where these moral crusaders, now I don't smoke and I don't own a gun. Now these moral crusaders, if you're following the newspaper, are trying to ban smoking in parks, outside, where anybody can just walk away. There is no science, there is no danger when you smell a little cigarette smoke.
I agree.
You can move, they can move. So my only idea with the set down is because this is what the NRA is worried about. You start doing this, and now it keeps tumbling and tumbling, and it keeps snowballing, and that's exactly what's happening here. So it becomes a political football, and so now in the United States was settled totally differently than European countries. You know, this was a Wild West thing for just 200 years ago.
European countries were pretty wild.
We have deeply entrenched love to guns, which is, I personally believe it's some kind of a compensation device. But speaking of the cigarettes, I'm one of the people that was outraged that smoking was banned because there is no science. I think there was one person that has actually been officially documented of having some kind of issue with secondhand smoking. There's no science to it. Smoking is not illegal. Smoking is not illegal anywhere in the world. It is not an illegal activity. You can't start banning and regulating something that is not illegal. What are you doing? I agree. And we are not left and right. It's about freaking common sense.
Yeah,
it's about common sense
and compromise. And that's the issue that I think perhaps Tom is trying to get to, is that everybody is so quick to make their point and get their point, to be the one that everybody listens to, that pick an issue, any issue, and we as Americans, it seems as if we're more prone to it than many others. We just don't like to compromise.
We don't, and we're in a time now where if I disagree with you, you're a hater, or you're against children, or something. We have no discourse anymore. And
I have found it interesting, and I'd be interested in what my learned friend says from Bulgaria, is that I came to America, never been to America before, came to America, married to an American. And Americans, I have learnt, do not like being told. They don't like to be told.
Especially by foreigners.
Yeah. They if you want to have real trouble, it's working with the American military, where you have a senior officer from another country who happens to be in charge. And they have all sorts of problems because it's just a cultural thing. They don't like to be told. So, what are you saying, though, Tom Conway, sponsor and purveyor of everything that one's heart can desire here in the Emporium? What is your solution if you became president in November, January 17, 2017? What would you be doing about gun control? Or, if not control, what would you be doing to mitigate the deaths of 10 to 15 people a day, every day, from gun violence?
Well, I'm not one that trusts social media. I think people die every day all over the world because of gun violence. They do. We have laws that are not administered correctly. Like, I guess the laws were working just fine in California. They skirted the law. I don't know enough. I do know there's plenty of laws that could, if they were obeyed, this would happen. I mean, there are background checks.
But that would be the worst presidential response to this issue
well,
ever.
Hold on.
Often we have all the time. Okay, I was just going to say we have a million laws on the books, but they don't get enforced. We just have new laws because somebody wants to get elected. So even though there's plenty of laws on a particular issue, a guy will run or a woman will run and say, I'm going to do a law about this and that. And everybody goes, yeah, even though, because you don't get elected if the law is already on the books. So I think it's a political thing.
So you're saying nothing, no regulation, nothing.
There
Just
are
don't
regulations.
touch it.
There are regulations.
What are the regulations?
Streamline them.
What is
well,
the regulation?
I don't have a list. Of
You know, I
regulations.
went to Topeka to a gun show as a working experiment for writing an article 3 years ago.
Sure, that was fun.
And you know that there was absolutely no regulation, no control.
No, I was told that wasn't true. Because I asked that.
I was
Okay,
there.
well, he was there because I have guys that buy guns and said you still have to wait 2 weeks. That
No,
they said
you
Not at all.
don't.
No,
Yeah.
I
Go down
I'll
to
defer.
the
But I
city
think-
last
I think
weekend,
Tom
you
has-
could buy yourself a Glock
I was
17.
walk out.
Mark for,
Yes.
you can
Hold
go,
on,
you pay
guys.
$600 and walk out.
Well,
I
why
walked
is
It's
into a
really
big
important
tent.
to notice that Tom just agreed with President Obama. Tom essentially just said exactly what the president's executive orders on guns are.
And I don't like that because it's nothing. It's just you're just saying a lot of people die every day everywhere. Let's not do anything because there's a lot of laws. Just dancing around and not doing anything. I agree that things can snowball and can take it to the extreme left. But you can't just because of that not do anything. You can't allow people that are blacklisted to buy guns. You can't allow criminals to buy guns. You have to have background checks. Human being is...
I think Tom was implying that those laws are on the books and that what he would like to see is true implementation of them.
That's good if that will happen, but close the loopholes. That's it. That's all that
I agree.
Obama...
The
that's all.
loopholes are part of the law, which means the law has no effect in many circumstances.
If that's true, this is such a political
But that is
football. It's
true.
hard to believe. No, there are felons cannot get guns.
Not true.
They can buy them
A
on the
felon
internet.
can get a gun.
I can be have a criminal record. Walk in with Kathleen. Pretend that she's my wife for just a second.
Stop
Okay.
dreaming.
Sorry. Okay. So pretend that Kathleen is my wife.
Put your
I can walk
hand
into
back.
a gun shop.
Get your
and
hand off
say-
the lady.
I can say to the gun
Dear.
owner, "Here, this lady's my wife. She's going to buy this gun for me," and they will still sell me the gun.
Well, what kind of law would you?
There's a law against it. It's called straw purchases.
There's-
Still happens all the time.
You can buy guns
All right, so
off
you
the
do
internet
have a law. That I guess
and
that's my
skirt all
point,
that.
Kathleen. There is a law.
Yeah,
So
but
they just need to
my-
streamline the law rather than run on a platform of I'm going to make sure straw purchases
Well,
don't
Kathleen
happen.
You
is
can buy
saying
a
is you've got to wear a
non-working
skirt.
gun on the internet. All they do is they send it to you in two different parts. And you put them together, and all of a sudden it's working, but they were both legal.
Oh,
No
you
background check, no nothing.
Gun sales on the internet, very easy. Gun sales at gun shows, extremely easy. You just walk into a big tent, you come out with whatever gun you desire, including AR-15s. And, I agree, on some level I agree with Tom, because at this point, in terms of solution, even if something is done, the solution is not going to be there, because there's already 310 million firearms that are in private hands already. So if you implement strict gun laws right
Which
now...
I believe is actually the same or more than the
the
present
population.
U.S. census.
Yeah, the population.
Yeah.
So there's more guns than people in private hands in the United States. So even if you take all the guns, there's still be enormous amount of firearms. And, what Australia did was a buyback program, and that worked. I don't know if that would work here, but it
Well, they
worked in
still have
Australia.
a lot of weapons that didn't,
Oh, yeah.
that didn't make it into
Yeah.
the pipe, but they did reduce some. So we've done it a little bit. We've got further than we've got before as to, and I will email the president back after having got the email. From
Tell him
him
I
this
said
morning.
hi.
And we will talk about the president. Talking to the president. The president of this country made his last State of the Union address. The country's first black president has performed as those went out and cheered for him. Did he? Did he perform as all those people went out and cheered and dreamed about him? Has he actually achieved for the African American community? Has the African American community in reality held back on him? They've had their first black president. Did they use him to the extent that they might have done?
I think
and
you
I
might
think
have
we
a-
should. I think we should not start this one with Lewis.
I think you might have a slightly wrong idea of what the President of the United States is supposed to do. He's not there as an advocate for one part of the population or one point of view. He's there as the President of the entire country and everybody in it.
Or even can do. Even
Yeah.
if you walk in with a great agenda, whatever that agenda may be.
It is huge that we had a guy as president who was African American descent. Now, that is huge. It will be huge when we get a female president. But as for actually taking actions, this president and most of the Democrats lately have been unable to do anything because the Republican Party has changed its tactics into total non-cooperation. And they decided to do that specifically with him. That's not his fault.
I'm not sure that I agree. I think that if the Republican Party has engaged in this course of non-cooperation for with the last four Democrat presidents, and the Democrat
It's worse than
structure
ever.
hasn't figured out a way to adjust and compensate for that, hasn't figured out a way to mobilize its voter base to get the Republicans out of office. I don't think you can justifiably say that that's not Obama's fault. At very least, it is the fault of the Democratic
He can't,
Party.
except for
Democrat
executive
Party, yeah.
orders, which he is doing now. He can't sign bills that don't get passed.
Executive orders are extremely dangerous, and we should.
But that's the only weapon left to him, and he's using it.
No,
So he's doing what he can.
and he shouldn't. Even for gun control, I don't think he should, because it will set a precedent. And
Are
the next.
you under
The
the impression
president
that
was
he's the first
already-
president to ever
yeah.
use executive
It's
orders?
what's going
He's
on.
been having
Honestly,
it
used
out
it
all the
less.
time.
I know,
So then-
I know. But Bush has used it more. But I think that once he starts, for example, he uses executive order now on guns. Trump, 15 minutes after, said, if I get the presidency, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my executive power to trump his executive power.
But executive
Pardon the-
power is not a
yeah.
law. It doesn't
It-
last
I know.
beyond the people who instituted it and are capable of keeping it going.
I know, but this country has been based on separation of power and on three branches of government. And if you start abusing this, if you start abusing the executive
An
order...
executive
and-
order is not a law. It is executive power. That's what he's supposed to do. That is not an abuse of power. That's what he's there for.
No. I think Evo
He's
has
running the country.
No, I think Evo has an incredibly valid point that when I was just talking earlier about placing myself as the boogeyman for the pro-gun lobby. I think that Obama has found himself in this unfortunate place of being the boogeyman for whatever special interest group you want to name here. And in the case of the executive order scenario that Evo's bringing up, I think he's exactly right. I think that even though Reagan, Bush the younger, all used executive orders. Shrub. Yes, I'm sorry. Even though they all used executive orders with much more intensity than Obama has thus far, you don't really hear about it because they weren't being placed in that boogeyman role that Obama has been placed in.
Yeah.
And now that he is in that role, the other side is going to use his using one executive order as an excuse to use them carte blanche. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable position for him to take because we're kind of seeing it already.
Oh,
Yeah, but you
And-
can't just fold up and
No.
do nothing
I agree.
I understand,
because
but,
they're going to be evil no matter what.
But think about a Trump presidency and the power of the executive order. He's going to
He's
carpet.
going to do it whether Obama did or not.
No,
He would.
He's going to carpet bomb common sense with executive decisions, power decisions. So it's going to be a complete disaster. When you look at the Obama presidency, I think what he did yesterday. By the way, I was thinking all day yesterday. What is the zip code for the State of the Union address?
Damn, Evo.
But
Damn.
no. I was thinking that he did something right. He started actually taking credit for the first time.
He really
something,
needed to have been doing
something
that.
he has had to be long time ago, and his party needed to make a giant list, and you've seen it on Facebook. The list of incredible accomplishments that these 8 years have done. And for the first time I was actually impressed with him because he said, hey, Shut up. Look at what I've done right here.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Do you remember the crisis? Do you remember the freaking economic collapse that this country was in? Do you remember that there was no manufacturing? Do you know who saved the car industry? Do you remember when everybody was screaming, oh, the failed stimulus? How is it failed now, bitches? Why is the
Yeah.
economy through the roof?
You
Why?
You could see the effect of his speech in the faces of half of that chamber who just sat on their hands, including the guy behind the president.
Oh, he
I
was
saw a
so-
great tweet. Oh yeah, somebody took a picture of his television. Said I couldn't take it anymore. He draped a T-shirt over half of it, so he could see the president and the vice president.
Let's put our heads together. Here we have a smart panel. Let's think about
And
what
me.
he's done. Yeah.
And me.
Okay, let's start in 2008, and talk about the economic crisis and the stimulus that everybody was screaming about, and the car industry and the measures that he took. That's a huge accomplishment. What about the Affordable Care Act? Yes,
Oh, yeah.
I know that it should have been a million times better, but it's something, and we've accomplished so much in
Hey,
providing insurance
17 million is not
Yeah.
negligible.
Yeah. Insurance for people who had never been insured. Just getting rid of pre-existing conditions was huge. I mean, this was just such a glaring injustice. Talk about crisis event management. Things that Bush failed so miserably at. With Katrina, there hasn't been a problem with it. What he's done is he's hired competent people in every branch of the government, in every agency. There's competent people. This is something that Bush did not do. He was hiring clonies.
I think after 8 years, 7 years, it is fair to stop comparing him to Bush. I think that only the most silly person would ever say that he was a worse president than Bush.
Yeah.
I think for me, the
there's
more
people that
important.
say that.
Well, there's people that are
Morons all
still
over the
say we
place.
never
Yeah.
went to the moon too. There's a.
When did we do that?
Don't worry about it. It
You
was an
weren't here.
American thing.
It was
Yeah.
done on a movie lot.
Yeah.
according to Sam.
What was that all about then? Going to the moon, maybe? That thing.
I think maybe a more germane question. It's sort of getting back to what.
Back to me.
I'm sorry. I as much as I don't want to, yes. Back to you, Jeremy's question about whether or not Obama has had basically a pass from the African American community. Can I go now? Is it all right?
Go.
If I could? I think it's a stupid question. I think that the notion that that African Americans would somehow be more angry at him, or should be more angry at him, when he quite literally has left the country in a much better place than when he found it, is kind of divisive and kind of just somebody looking for headlines. Whoever came up with that notion is someone looking for headlines.
I think it originated in Fox
Oh
News.
my
Yes.
God!
Yeah.
There's a giant laundry list of ridiculous accomplishments by this administration in the last. Just look at the freaking unemployment. Do you remember Mitt Romney when he was running for president, promising unemployment at 7%?
Yeah.
It's like 5%. It's insane. Look at the gas prices. Look at the bursting economy, manufacturing deficit.
There's some of that
he can't quite take credit for those gas prices.
Yeah.
That'd be a war between Saudis and us.
I
Who
don't
can
know.
put
Well,
enough out
I
there?
don't know.
To be fair, though, like I remember at the end of the first term, you and I had this conversation about what kind of job he had done, and you were all A+ then for Obama, and I was a solid C-, C+, C-. I thought he had accomplished some things, but there were enough broken campaign promises and not enough forward progress that he really did deserve anything above a C
But you have
after
to
that
take
first term.
You have to take in consideration the atmosphere that he's working in. I mean, look at the insane resistance. Louis, in his first speech, somebody yelled, "You're a liar." He had to deal with insane stuff, with birthers and death panels and madness and racism every single day.
I'm
No
not
other
taking away from
president
any of that.
No
had
other
to
president.
deal
This is
with
the
it.
first time they have
Yeah.
completely set against everything.
Completely.
The whole
I-
purpose
again,
was
Just
to
for him
demonize
to
it.
fail, not for other reasons. They want him to fail.
No. I get that, and I get that, anytime that there's going to be somebody that breaks a barrier, that they're going to have to deal with all those kinds of things. I still don't think that made that first term. Now,
now that they've
just need to-
learned it, it's going to happen with every Democrat.
Right. Well, I agree with that too. But I really can honestly and truthfully say, second term Obama, I'm completely comfortable saying A minus, A plus.
What about his Achilles heel, his foreign policy? That
Do you really
everybody's
think
talking
that is
about?
an Achilles heel?
Everybody is talking about it. He's not tough enough. He's not. I think it's just he's found a different. The future holds a different type of warfare. It's not about sending the troops with rockets, and bombs. It's about extracting terrorists, finding
Yeah,
cells.
but can't he at least go bitch slap Putin?
And
But there is an argument that the Israelis have a cultural thing about, you whack us, we're going to whack you even harder. And the other saying of it's all about, Mr. President, an appropriate response. And so withdrawing some support from the Israelis may not have been a bad thing, and we should always remember it's not widely publicly known that Israel's primary air defense system is American built, and guess what?
I think that's pretty widely known. They announce that every single time they talk about using the Iron Dome.
Yes, what they don't know is that each unit has an American officer keeping an eye on it, military officer serving American Army. Or American Air Force. Those sort of things, we do support Israel. But doesn't there come a time when a president says, you know what, I'm just bringing all our troops home. Let them kill themselves for 2 or 3 years. Anybody tries nuking anybody, then they're going to hear from one of our submarines. But in the meantime, we're just going to pull our troops out of Syria. We're going to pull our troops out of Germany. We're going to pull our troops out of South Korea. We're going to pull our troops out of everywhere. Just let them get on with it.
So do you think that's his doctrine? That's Obama's doctrine? He decided to kind of stay back and watch them solve their problems?
I think he's an accountant.
You think so?
I think he's an accountant who had a really good spin team that got him elected as president. That's what I think, yeah.
So you don't agree with what he's done in terms of foreign policy?
I think you say he. I'm fairly sure that it's Hillary Clinton and various different other people who've been doing foreign policy.
I don't know. I'm personally considering
his view is to sit back.
Yeah, just like every other freaking country in the world does. Just like everybody else does. They sit back and they wait most of the time.
Well, I also think that the Obama of the first administration is completely different than the Obama of the second. I think he came in there as somewhat of an idealist with a little bit of, pie in the sky attitude of, through arbitration and through conversation we can bring peace. And I don't think that's the world we live in, and I think he learned that. I think it was a hard lesson for him to learn, but I think he learned it. And you might be interested to know that Middle East experts at this moment in time consider the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to be the least important and least troublesome of all the conflicts going on in that area.
So you're saying the Obama of the first administration was different than the Obama from the second administration?
I think he learned that
or maybe he has a twin brother.
Well,
and
I think he had to learn to be tougher as time went on.
It was a very important foreign policy success yesterday evening, and that was when one of our powerboats lost power, and the other one that was there was unable to rescue it, drifted into Iranian waters, recognized Iranian waters, by the way. The Iranians turned up, arrested the crew, which they were perfectly in their rights to do, and diplomatically, the Iranians didn't make a big deal about it. They said they were in our waters. They have also quite clearly said they didn't mean to do it. It was because of mechanical breakdowns. We arrested them, which is what we would have done to an Iranian crew.
Yeah.
We talked to them. They weren't beaten up or anything like that, and then they were released back to their country later on. And I think that is all to do with John Kerry and and the Iranians realizing we want to have nuclear power. We want to do these various different things. and America is reaching out to us, so we have to do it. If we had had a far-right Republican president who had at that point, the moment those sailors
We're in Iranian water.
were in Iranian waters, had started saying they've taken our sailors, they've done this, they've done that. Who knows what might have happened?
Sometimes,
you're skipping a few steps here. If we had a far right-wing president, we would not have the Iran nuclear deal on the table as we speak, which, not to be, a little bit of a pessimist, but maybe just a little, the sanctions are
Donna?
due. Yeah,
A little?
No, actually, I'm very optimistic. F you.
You.
But the sanctions are, very soon to be lifted if all goes well. And I can't help but think the Iranians had that a little bit in the back of their minds. That got to keep this positive ball
I'd
rolling.
love to be asking President Carter what his views are on
sometimes I feel like Conroy uses Iranian waters in his draft beer.
And
And I know the Iranian who provided those waters.
And we will now move on to the first game of the night. The first game of the night, we're going to call it Bona Fide or Bollocks. Bona Fide or Bollocks. This is a game where a member of the team comes up with a saying and two definitions of that saying. The origins, perhaps, or where it came from. And he's going to come up with two. Today it's going to be Lewis. He's going to come up with two. And we, as the panel, the other four of us, are going to have to think about what we believe is the correct origin, or whether he's talking bollocks, or whether we believe he's bona fides.
Well,
Where you go, Lewis?
A little bit different.
Oh, did you?
I found.
Well, thank you.
I found two phrases.
Two phrases.
And I gave the origin story for both phrases.
Uh-huh.
One of them is true. One of them is false.
Okay.
You guys have to figure out which one.
And don't just shout it out,
Yeah. You got to put on your thinking caps.
because Eric, the producer, will have to produce this.
All right.
So,
first phrase is namby-pamby.
Okay, my thinking cap is on.
Thinking cap is on?
namby-pamby.
Yes,
Namby-pamby.
namby-pamby. Okay, so this phrase was popularized by an author, but the author is actually not the person that came up with the phrase. It was actually his grandfather, Hans. So,
Hans.
yes.
Hans.
The grandfather's name is not important. I'm gonna hold off on giving you the author's name because it's gonna be my dramatic reveal of the story.
Okay.
Okay.
Hans.
So Hans, yes, Hans basically. Oh, I'm sorry. I should preface this by saying this was found in the author's journal not too long ago, like within the last 6 months or so.
Oh, okay.
He got a cautionary tale from his grandfather. His grandfather had a brother named Emmanuel. Emmanuel was a delicate little kid who mother loved, and apparently Hans was jealous. Hans was jealous. He thought that mom loved Emmanuel better because mom referred to Emmanuel as Manny. So one day in a fit of rage, and this is all according to the journal, Hans says to the author that he made up a mean name for Manny, called him Namby-Pamby Manny, to make fun of the nickname, because apparently he didn't have one. Namby-Pamby. So he told this to his grandson because he saw that his grandson had a penchant for making up words. So he told his grandson, Lewis Carroll, this so that he would not hurt other kids at that age. Now, this phrase happened to stick with Lewis Carroll, and so in some of his later writings, the phrase namby-pamby appears, and it is immediately latched onto by popular culture at the time. They turn it into, you now have plays that are called namby-pamby. You have namby-pamby showing up in children's literature, what have you. So that is the story of namby-pamby. It is the name, yes, of his great uncle Emmanuel, or the ridicule.
Second
All right,
story.
Second story is about the phrase "spill the beans." So there's going to be somebody here at the table that's going to tell me the same apocryphal story that you find all over the internet, that "spill the beans" dates back to some imaginary Greek service where you put beans in a pot to count your votes.
Let me guess, does it have to do with colonoscopy?
If only. No. No. So, okay. So what I can say is Don't know if that's got anything to do with the truth or where that phrase comes from, but what we can say for sure is that that phrase doesn't show up in Greek literature. It doesn't show up any place else until it shows up here about 100 or so years ago. And when it shows up here about 100 or so years ago, it's not what we think it is. When we think of spill the beans, we think of somebody that is telling a secret or somebody that is taking the blame for some action or activity. Completely not what spill the beans originally meant. Originally, it meant upset the apple cart. It was used to describe a politician who got elected to Congress, and when the big boys in Congress wouldn't play with him, he left their table or their discussion and upset the cart or spilled the beans by taking the other politicians that weren't allowed to talk to the big boys and taking them, and they started their own table, for lack of a better way to describe it.
So what are we trying to say is which one's bollocks and which one's true?
Which one's bollocks and which one's true?
First one's true, Jeremy says.
The mamby-pamby's true.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go with the second one.
Man, I'd have to go with the second one, too.
I like the mamby-pamby better. I say that's,
Oh, it's
that's
2 to
true.
2.
That's true.
So 2-2.
So figure it out.
Well, Lewis Carroll was his famous story writer. The stuff that he wrote was very dark. And so, if this sort of thing, these toxic parents and toxic grandparents, I can completely imagine him living with a story like that.
See, the reason I'm having difficulty with it, and I don't know the origin of it, but a slur against gays was always, namby-pamby has come down as a slur against a possible gay man, and one that goes way, way back is Nancy Boys. And although I have absolutely, as I said, no idea of the origin of the word, that's what my mind gets drawn to, is something that came out of anti-gay culture.
So what's
Well,
it to be?
spill the beans sounded awfully plausible because it's got that, take on, it's not what you thought it was. So I'm going to go with spill the beans.
I think it's an ancient Bulgarian right.
It's possible, but also
The
for
shrub
the same
in South Africa.
For the same reason, I'm just going to go with against the spin the bills because it's too plausible, and I don't think Lewis would concoct something that's so obvious. It just wants to deceive us. So
Okay.
I
Tell
think
us.
that's it.
The real story is spill the beans. Spill the beans is, in fact, originally meant to upset the apple cart. It appeared.
I'm going to be adult about this now.
The namby-pamby thing, I completely made up whole cloth.
How dare you?
It's
How
about
dare
100 years older than Lewis
Lewis
Carroll.
Carroll?
Yeah.
Can I
Okay.
go next?
You're going to do one. All right.
Yeah,
okay.
they're different format though.
Okay.
Okay, because I won. All right.
It's gonna be no living with.
But I also agreed that the second one
Yeah,
was
but you weren't as
correct.
noisy as I was.
And so did I. I
well,
thought it was the second one.
I don't think so,
Alrighty then.
So what's
Okay.
your? This is another
I have
game.
several of them. I will try run the gauntlet. Two possible meanings. One of the, when you throw down the gauntlets, giving a challenge. Well, it's similar to that. If you return a gauntlet to the opposing force in a battle, that is surrendering. It used to be anyway. So running the gauntlet was the poor sucker who had to take the gauntlet back to the other side. He ran the gauntlet, and it was a real trial.
Gotcha.
Okay? The other possibility is the word gauntlet is a bastardization of the Swedish gatlopp. Two old Swedish words for road and course, which means it's just running a course. And gauntlets, gloves that don't actually have anything to do with it.
So
Okay, I'm going to pick because it's Swedish and European. We're going to go with Evo first.
Yeah. Well, bastardization of anything Swedish sounds like a beginning of a porn movie. I'm going to go with that.
You think that's the truth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lewis.
I'm going to go with the running the glove to the other guy story.
So we've got 2 running the gloves.
No.
No.
Oh, sorry,
He's got
one
it.
glove.
No,
One-
he's
I got the
going with the
Swedish.
Swedish
He likes the
porn.
sweet.
So he's going
He's
with the
Swedish
Swedish.
porn, yes.
Donna, you going with the
No,
porn
if
or
I
the-
had a dime.
or the running back?
He's going with the Swedish porn.
Damn, neither one of them sounds very good to me, but I guess I'll go with the first one.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to go with the
She likes
second
the-
one because the first one, if you were actually taking a gauntlet back to the other side, etiquette in those days would have said that that guy was doing it under the white flag of truce, and a gentleman, or a knight or what have you, would not kill a person approaching under the...
No, but they beat him up pretty much.
Not necessarily.
So which one was it?
Well, Jeremy is right. That one is false.
E.
Running the gauntlet.
E.
It's actually
Always go with the Swedish porn.
Always go with the porn.
absolutely nothing to do with gloves. And gauntlet was because the word sounded the same.
Gotcha.
Running the gauntlet is simply running a course.
And in our second game today, which maybe 1 or 2 people might want to join in, this is where we lie to each other. This is a new game. It's where we lie to each other. And it's called When I Met. It's called When I Met. The game starts with the panel members saying, when I met, or I met, such and such a famous person, and then tells a very short story about that meeting. Clearly, they've probably never met that famous person. And the idea is for the team member to think about, dream about, fantasize, or having a conversation with that person. This week, it's David Bowie. So let's start with Evo.
Isn't it David
First of all,
Bowie?
I just heard that the other day.
Bowie.
My God, that's how they pronounce it in England is Bowie. They were
that is how
commenting
he-
on his death, and they were talking to an
And that
English
is how
music
he.
historian.
And that is how he calls it, David Bowie.
And of course, we say Bowie.
I think he asked to be called Bowie. Didn't he?
Well, we call him Bowie.
So I'm
I
gonna call
had
him
to-
Clay. I'm gonna call him Clay.
It was after the Bowie.
Okay,
So-
when did you meet
so-
him, and how did he pronounce
So
his
yeah,
name?
so
then?
It was a short meeting. I appreciate David. I appreciate Ziggy Stardust. But the truth is, guys, I appreciate far much more his supermodel wife, Iman. And the way we met, and it was a very short meeting, was he walked on us. He walked on me and Iman. He wasn't happy, and I can't blame him. I respect the guy, but there's some things that you can't resist, and Iman is one of those
Fine,
things.
then there's
And,
totally outside the realm of possibility.
so he walked in on us. He kicked me out of his home. He
Didn't
put a
use his
strain.
Bowie knife.
He put a strain on his relationship, and this is how I met David Bowie. I'm sorry, I know what he would say if he was alive today. He would say, "Too soon, you bastard."
Kathleen.
Oh, well, I did live in England for quite a long time before I even met Jeremy. And when I was out at a pub with a friend of ours, and this was in Maidenhead, and my husband, and we were sitting there outside on the terrace having drinks. It was a beautiful night. It's that one night in England that was nice.
Oh, that night.
Yeah,
It was on the
yeah,
news.
that one night. And David Bowie, as he's known there, came in with a bunch of his folks. They were partying. They'd been at some recording studios nearby. And unfortunately, one of the girls with him tripped over her wedges and fell straight onto our table and spilled all our drinks all over the place. So he very graciously bought us all other rounds and said something about what a nice evening it was. And I said, yep, this is a wonderful, serious moonlight out here tonight. Very shortly after that, he went on a tour that he called the Serious Moonlight Tour.
Yes.
That was my phrase.
Very bambi.
So what about you, Lewis?
Okay,
When you met...
I met David Bowie,
Yeah.
and I had no idea who he was. So I've mentioned before that I grew up with Jehovah's Witness. I was not exposed to a lot of classic rock growing up. So the first time I had ever even heard of Mr. Bowie was with the song Let's Dance. And I don't think that's a great song. In fact,
that's 80s.
that's in the 80s. So this is really the only exposure to David Bowie that I've had up to that point. I literally...
For God's sakes, that's not how we pronounce it in the United States.
I literally don't know what he looks like. So fast forward to 1988. I am going out to a mall in St. Louis. This is the first time I've ever been to this mall. It's actually not a mall. It's Union Station. Going out to Union Station with a friend of mine. We walk into Union Station, and I've never seen anything like it because in addition to being a Jehovah's Witness, I am incredibly poor. Like, we just don't go to malls and things like that. So I am walking around, and I'm just kind of taking things in, and there's something that catches my eye, maybe some performers or something, some kind of street performance that's going on over here in the corner. I turn and I look, and just as soon as I realize that I probably should stop walking, I bump into someone. And it's basically this guy with three guys kind of talking to him, chatting around him. So the guy turns around and looks at me, and it is the most bizarre person that I've ever seen because of the eye thing. You guys know about the eye. It kind of freaks me out. I'm a little bit lost as I'm sitting there. Like, I'm looking at him, and the other three guys are kind of freaking out. And at some point, this guy, David, I know now that is David Bowie, says, no, it's okay. And he pulls out his wallet. He's got his wallet in his chest. And one of the other guys leans over and says something to him, and I really want to do an English accent, but I can't get his intonations or whatever. And he says, essentially, no, I felt his nose in my back. He's not a pro, or something along the... Not
a very long story. This is where this is going.
not a pro, or not a something. I don't remember exactly what it was. Anyway, the guy looks at me, David Bowie, looks at me and says, "Do you know my name?" And I look at him like I should know his name, but I don't. So I say no, and he says, "See, it's all good," to the other three guys. And then he leans over and says something to one of the other guys, and he says, "Thank you very much," and they walk off. Well, this one guy that he is talking to basically hands me a ticket. The ticket is for the David Bowie show that night. And that is literally the first time I have bumped into anybody famous.
The time I met him actually was interesting because I was hanging out with some friends, and we'd driven back down the motorway to... we used to congregate at around about 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning at a motorway services. We call them greasy spoons, at a place called Scratchwood, which is literally about 5 miles north of London. So coming down from doing all the different gigs, all the trucks, you call them semis, would pull into Scratchwood around about 4 or 5 o'clock, right? And we would get a fried breakfast, okay? And I was working with another band at the time, which you probably haven't heard of here, which was called T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Oh, yeah, we know.
And we come down...
It loses every morning, so is T-Rex.
We come down, and what you did was, and you could have famous people, and there was our lot, and then there was Mott the Hoople and a bunch of their singers, and then in walks, there was it was a black, not a limo, but like a black sedan, pulled in, and in walked Bowie and a few other guys, and came over and sat at the end, no further away, 6-7 feet away from me, and they were just sitting there. I'm thinking, that's David Bowie. So I said to him, so, you're doing Starman and all this, because that's when it was, Starman and everything. And he goes, yeah, right, And I said, but, so why did you do Laughing Gnome? And Laughing Gnome was his first success back in the 60s. And we will be playing Laughing Gnome on our radio show later on this week. But that made everybody laugh
about the damn radio show again.
Because we all started singing, ha ha ha, he, I'm a laughing gnome and you can't catch me.
Oh, this legendary.
It's a legendary song by David Bowie from the late 60s. And folks, thank you so much. Of course, we lost a great guy over the weekend. It gives you an idea of when we're recording the show. Donna, you ever met David Bowie?
Met a lot of famous people, but no. Not him.
Well, in that case,
That's the only reason it belongs.
you've been listening to Wednesday Night Undressed from Conroy. You're joining hundreds of other people who are now going to the pod site. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that, Lewis?
Just go to WednesdayNightUndressed.com. There'll be a link to go to the podcasts, and you can hear what we've been doing for the last 2 months.
Wednesday Night Undressed, folks, if you go there, you will find 4 or 5 Wednesday Night Undresses. It's fascinating. Thanks for listening.